of Business Wellness in Hamilton, where we talk about strategies to build and enhance our businesses. Today, we have a best-selling author, international speaker, and business coach here to share her vast experiences with mental and financial wellness. Welcome, Jane. How are you?
I'm good, Linda. Thank you. How are you?
I'm great.
I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I'm sure. And you know what? I'm really excited with what you're going to share with us today. Let's start with your book.
My book.
Let's take a look at it.
Okay. So with the stroke of a pen, Claim Your Life, is a book that I wrote, and it's sharing a true story. Unfortunately, it's a story of loss and becoming a widow with a 12-and-a-half-year-old at a very early age, and then remarrying another widow. So we have two under the same roof and a child who lost her father. So we decided we were going to share our story to help another family never to have to go through what we went through. And I'm very proud to say it's in its third edition and it's now a bestseller.
I read your book, Jane, and it's a wonderful book, a tearjerker, and a real eye-opener. Really helps you put into perspective. Really helps you put into perspective how quickly things can change, and in less than a moment.
Oh, in my case, it was less than 60 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So my husband left in the morning and kissed my daughter and I goodbye, and off he went. And that afternoon, a police officer walked up my driveway in the afternoon to tell me that my husband, 39-year-old husband, had been killed that morning in an accident. And so in 60 seconds, because he died in less than 60 seconds, my world turned upside down. And I went from being what I thought was a educated, confident, well put together woman with an executive job and whatever, to somebody who couldn't even decide what kind of vegetables she wanted for dinner when I was asked. So it just turned my world upside down.
So that trauma really tipped things in such a way that you really had to think, how prepared were you? Were you prepared, Jane?
I thought I was prepared because I was in the insurance industry when it happened. So I was prepared, but I wasn't as well prepared as I thought I was. So that's part of the reason for the book, is because I thought, if with all my education, my knowledge, my training, my designation, all of that, if I could be blindsided by something, what does the average person do? But I didn't just want to share the story, because I wanted to do a call to action. I wanted to help people to get past the fear of talking about, illness, death, getting their finances in order and whatever. So I spent 2 years doing research with accountants, lawyers, financial advisors, funeral pre-arrangement specialists. And at the back of the book, there's a 33-page master checklist to help people how to have... I'm coined as a catalyst for courageous conversations, because as you and I have discussed before, these are courageous conversations. Yes. People don't sit around the dinner table talking about this sort of thing.
And my experience is most people don't want to talk about it at all. And they think if they don't talk about it, it's not going to happen.
It might happen to you, but it won't happen to me.
Absolutely.
Is what a lot of people think. And so because there were two widows and a child under one roof, one day I went, okay, I've got it. I'm supposed to do something with this, which is called Pay It Forward.
Right. And so your book tells your journey, your personal journey, and really developing your mental and financial resilience. And then for the readers, there's the checklist at the back that helps them set themselves up for opportunities for success.
And you're right. And I did it that way because I thought, okay, I could just share the story, but I wouldn't be helping anybody to actually go to the next step, which is to actually take matters into their hands and to be able to, go out and have the conversations. So the checklist at the back is literally boxes, as you've seen, and there's note pages in there, because my vision for the book was that people would be running around with this dog-eared book because they'd go to one person who'd say, okay, now the financial advisor would say, now go talk to your lawyer about this or your accountant. So I wanted everybody to put it all into one place, as opposed to Post-it notes and pages flying everywhere and whatever. So that was sort of the premise behind it.
Yes, that's excellent. But you also have a complimentary planner that goes with your book. Can you tell us about that?
Certainly. So the readers came back and said, I love your checklist, but you keep telling me I've got to get all this stuff together. What do I do? Where do I start? How do I do it? So hence was born, after a 5-month research and development project where I nearly ripped all my hair out trying to get it all together. This is the companion planning binder that goes with the book. And there's 14 different sections in it. And it's just It's meant to be a place to get everything in one place. You don't put all the documents in the binder with it, but it indicates where they're all located. And it talks about wills, and it talks about accountants, and it talks about property and casualty, it talks about funeral arrangements. It's everything so that if God forbid anything happens, you just go to the bookshelf and your loved one takes it off the shelf, or your executor's got the copy of it. And it really does help to minimize the confusion, because when somebody's ill,
yes,
and you're trying to care for them, the last thing you want is to be running around looking for documents. Same thing when somebody dies suddenly or whatever happens. So I've had a lot of great feedback, and I'm very proud to say it's in both a Canadian and a US version now, and it's been used quite extensively by legal firms, by financial advisors, and by just the general public who's seen me or heard me and have ordered them directly from me.
Well, you know, and I've had personal experience where I've had people very close to me be in situations where you don't want to talk to them about those things, because it's almost like you're saying, we're going to give up, or, you know, what's coming next. And so you're right. So having that go-to guide at your fingertips for your family is just ideal.
I've had some people who've been in palliative care situations who've got the binder, and they've told me that it was a very unintrusive, low-key way to have the discussion with somebody while they were still able to give them the answers that they needed.
Yes.
And that it really acted as a guide for them, and it seemed to calm people down.
Yes, and it makes a big difference too when you're in a situation where you don't have to ask those questions, but if it's normalized, it's something they're familiar with, it doesn't seem strange at all.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with someone who said to me, I wish your binder had been available, or I'd known about it, because my parents put a wall safe in their house. And my dad passed away, and my mother's the only one who knows the combination, and she has Alzheimer's, and she never wrote it down. So they had to pay $350 to bring somebody in to take the wall safe out.
Find the paperwork. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. So that doesn't. So, you know, taking this tool and thinking about financial and mental wellness, how do you think this is going to affect individuals in a business setting?
That's a great question. Business owners have a lot going on. They have a lot on their plate. And the last thing that business owners really need to be worried about is, how are they going to keep the lights on or keep my business running if I become critically ill or disabled, or somebody I love ends up in that situation and I want to take time off of work to be able to care for them. So it's a guide for business owners to help them to get all of their financial ducks in a row, as I like to call it, yeah, and to help them to know what's going on and be on top of things. Because again, the last thing you need if you're a business owner and you want to step out because you've become sick, or as I said, a loved one's become ill, is how do you pay your employees, and how do you keep the lights on, and how do you keep everything going? And then the other thing too is, if God forbid you become disabled and need to get out of the business, have you got plans in place for somebody to buy you out? Is there money available to do that? And if God forbid somebody passes away, then is there a buy-sell agreement in place? You know, or else you could end up in partnership with your partner's spouse or one of their children that you wouldn't want anywhere near you while the partner was alive. So this is to help get things documented, put in place, and taken care of while you can.
Yeah, and often business owners have so many other things to think about. They don't think about themselves. They don't think anything's going to happen. They're just trying to keep things going, and then it happens, and then things change very quickly. Can you share a story with us, maybe a more recent story that you've had where there's been a plan in place, and how that ran?
Well, I'm going to use my financial advisor as an example, because he had purchased a $2 million building. He had staff of 5 people. And about 24 months after he purchased the building, he was diagnosed with cancer, which took him out of commission for close to a year. And his wife was the office manager, took her out of commission as well, because she had to be his caregiver because he couldn't take care of himself. And so he had to trigger his critical illness insurance, which kept everything going, kept, you know, mortgage payments, paid his staff, everything else. He went back to work, and 18 months later, he thought he was having a heart attack. because he was getting all these pains in his chest and whatever. So he went to see the doctor, and the doctor said, "You're going straight to emergency. You're going into surgery." What had happened was an infection had lodged itself in his spine while he was fighting the cancer, and it was putting pressure on him because it was from here to the middle of his back, but it also paralyzed him from the waist down. And at the age of 66, he was in rehab learning how to walk again. He had to trigger his long-term care insurance. Now, the good news is he just turned 70, he's back at work, but the big joke was that they wrote more business while he was off of work than while he was at work.
Well, I don't know what it did for his self-esteem, but...
I know. But the thing is, he said the peace of mind that planning gave him allowed him to recover and to not worry about it, and to be able to keep the lights going and pay his employees, because they're like family to him. They've been with him for forever.
Yes.
So it was a hard story.
And on the other hand, if he hadn't done that, he might have had absolutely nothing to go back to. So with struggling with his illness and the secondary illness, it really could have affected, really how he lived the rest of his life. But now he's back on his feet, and because of these plans, I bet life is very good.
Yep. And the interesting thing is, in all my years, I was 27 years in the financial services industry, I never heard a widow or a widower say no thanks when somebody handed them a death claim check. You keep it, I'm fine. Yes. Or somebody who was given a critical illness or anything go, no, I'm good. The only thing I ever heard from anybody was, I wish there was more zeros on the check.
Yes, yeah, thank goodness for that. That's really wonderful. Yeah. Well, we're going to go to break now, and we'll come back, and Jane has some other stories, and we have some really interesting information to share with you.
Cancer affects us all, and together we can make a difference. I'm Dr. Sébastien Hutt, and I'm inviting you to support Juravinski Hospital and Cancer Center Foundation with an unforgettable fundraising event called Illuminate. Help shine a light on cancer with this magical walk under the stars. Join us October 4th at Diamonds Farm in Dundas. Register and fundraise today.
Hello, everyone. I had the privilege of working with the staff and volunteers at Cable 14 many moons ago when we jointly launched an innovative, cutting-edge news organization called News for Hamilton. Well, in this era of uncertainty with legacy media and social media, we in Hamilton are blessed to have an organization like Cable 14 that is dedicated to telling the stories, local stories, the most important stories about the people of Hamilton. To all of the staff and volunteers, thank you for the work that you do, and happy anniversary.
Government and broadcasters have come together to bring more alerts to more Canadians faster. Introducing Alert Ready. When an alert is broadcast, it's time to act. Learn more at alertready.ca.
On September 17th,
I hate to be that person, but I am a little scared.
the controversial journey into Indigenous Canada returns.
When I hear white privilege, it just pisses me off.
They don't want to rent to people that are Indigenous in the city.
We don't need to live in this world with hate.
Prejudices and ignorance challenged head on.
That's just all you hear. Residential school, residential school.
Those people that picked us up kidnapped us.
First Contact, a 3-part special event, begins September 17th on APTN.
What is that? It's a rape whistle.
The Canadian Women's Foundation, moving women and girls out of abuse and poverty and into confidence.
Welcome back. So Jane, tell us, what are 2 or 3 things that business owners tend not to consider in your experience?
In my experience. Well, they tend not to consider things as investments. They think of them too often as a cost. So they look at things and say, well, that cost. That's going to cost me this, that's going to cost me that. What they don't realize is that if they don't put the investment into protecting things, then the cost will be even bigger down the road. So they tend not to get some things done. So I'll give you an example. Quite often you will meet a business owner that might have a will drawn up by a lawyer, but they don't have a business will. They think they're one and the same. Right. They're not. So I'm a business owner, so I have an incorporated company, so I have a will and I have a business will for continuity, but a lot of times they don't think about that. They think one is sufficient and it will cover everything, and it doesn't. The other thing I also find sometimes is that business owners Linda, they're so busy looking after bringing in business, finding new business, branding themselves, marketing themselves, looking after their employees, everything else. They forget to think that the biggest asset that they own is walking around in their own two shoes. Yes. So they tend often to neglect their own health, or they tend to think, oh no, I'm just a machine, I'm just going to keep going, I'll get to that later. But yes, the later never happens.
Yeah, well, I guess maybe as a business role model, they want to show their employees all these skills they have, how resilient they are. But you're right, you have to be really authentic as a leader, and taking care of yourself is really demonstrating you being a very balanced individual. And I think that sometimes people just think, if I don't do it, who will? Yep. And what I often find is, if you take somebody and mentor them, whether they're your VP or you have a smaller business, and you share some of these things, as you're saying, it makes a big difference. And sometimes when you're sharing with somebody else and getting their ideas, and they can sort of become the go-to person.
So you mentioned it when we started, I'm also a business coach. So yes, I coach a lot of business owners. And one of the things I usually find is that they have not taken care of their own home. They're trying to help everybody else, but they forget to start with themselves. And I have one gentleman right now that I'm working with, and I said, so what happens in terms of long-term care?
Right.
And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, if you become ill or your wife becomes ill, what kind of plans do you have in place? And he goes, nothing. He said, I haven't really considered it. And I said, well, don't you think it's something that you might want to have a look into? Because this is extremely expensive, and it could be for, especially in your wife's case, could be for an extended period of time, because women live longer than men. And so it's about really having that conversation, as you said, but it's about, I go back to the fact that it's all about courageous conversations.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So, in the training I do in emotional intelligence, I always talk about, don't worry about tomorrow.
Yep.
Because when you're living in the moment, if you're thinking about tomorrow, you're not living today. Mm-hmm. But this is something the absolute opposite. This is planning so you don't have to worry about tomorrow. Correct?
That's exactly what it is. And the thing is it's amazing the peace of mind that comes over you when you finally get these plans in place. I've had so many people, because I do a lot of mentoring as well, and talking with business owners, and and I'm quite direct with people, and I say, you got to get this done, because something's going to happen somewhere. We all have an expiry date.
Yes.
I choose not to know when mine is. I think you do too.
Yes.
But it's about planning so that you can put that to one side and you can get on with living your life, knowing that if God forbid it takes a detour, because business owners' life isn't a straight line. We know it's, a journey like that. So it's just making sure that you've got everything in place so that if anything happens, you can focus on getting better or getting back to it, as opposed to lying awake at night, not sleeping because you're looking at the ceiling trying to figure out how you're going to cover everything or pay for everything.
Yes. Well, you're worrying about tomorrow. That's
Exactly.
what you're doing. And so you're saying that investing in these kind of insurance, putting these plans in place, will reduce that worry and give you a better quality of life. Now, I know that you speak out across the country, internationally. I'm just curious, the kind of individuals that take your training or come to hear you speak, are they doing it for themselves, or are they doing it for their clients? I'm just
Both.
curious.
Both. I have two sort of markets that I speak extensively into. One is the financial services industry, because I talk to advisors through the eyes of the beneficiary.
Yes,
and I help them to build trust relationships, because I am a big believer that everybody needs a financial advisor. Because in my hour of need, that man was my lifeline. I reached out to him, and like I said earlier, I couldn't decide what kind of a vegetable I wanted for dinner. Yet here I was making the most monumental decisions of my, adult lifehood in relation to finances. So I speak to the industry, but I also speak to the public at large. And I actually have a lot of advisors that bring me in to do client appreciation events to talk to their clients, because it's to show them the other side of the work that they do.
Yes, well, and that's a gift. Interestingly enough, I do a lot of speaking on legacy, and I really believe that we should be focusing on living our legacy. So what we're doing here together now is really living our legacy, part of who we are, what we say, and what we do. If we're really invested in living our legacy, we don't have to worry about what's left when we're not here. And it just goes hand in hand with what you're saying. And so it's very, very encouraging. But I'd love you to share with us, because I've read the book and it's quite compelling, just a couple of things that happened. So first of all, you're a very empathetic person, and I didn't know you before the book, so I'm assuming you were then. I think for me, I have a couple of fabulous advisors, and they're very empathetic people. They are people I can go to in crisis, or if I'm struggling. They're not going to judge me, they're there for me. And it sounds like you had that great experience. So were there other times throughout that there were individuals that really made a difference in helping you move forward?
Well, family first and foremost. If my poor sister, I think she regretted that there was a 2-hour time difference between where we were, because I could call her and get on the phone with her and bawl my eyes out, for an hour or whatever. But it's amazing the support network that comes around you. I was very fortunate in terms of my employer. My employer was excellent at helping me to get back to work. It took me 6 months to go from 2 hours a day to full time upon my return to work. And just because I was struggling with everything, because unfortunately I put the superwoman cape on and tied it really tight and nearly killed myself, because I wanted the world at large to see Jane was still okay, but inside Jane was secretly dying herself. So I also had some really good friends who, even though they'd never been through anything like that, really stepped up to the plate. And I was very fortunate, because for my husband's best friend and my best friend, the four of us were all best friends. We were supposed to live our lives out into retirement together and whatever. And he was the one that they called, because we had moved there and we didn't have family. And so they couldn't call a family member to be with me when they gave me the news. So when they finally got to me, gave me the news, they said, who should we call? So I asked them to call my best friend's husband, because she was out of town with the girls. And so they were a lifeline for me. Yeah, absolute lifeline.
So what I'm hearing you saying is it's really important to have courageous conversations now with your family, the ones you feel comfortable talking to, not with everybody, but you pick a few, and some really close friends. And I think that we tend not to do that. We tend to, let's not talk about something that's uncomfortable. Let's talk about what we're doing now, what we're going to be doing. But I think that, as we talked before, there's a bit of calmness about that planning. So you're saying find those people and invest the time now.
And invest the time when everything's okay.
Yes.
Because you can actually joke about things.
Yes.
You can talk about things. You can tease each other. You can do whatever. But you can't do it when you're in the moment. It's a very different thing when you're dealing with it. So it's important. Because, as I said, nobody's getting out. None of us are getting out of here alive. Somewhere, somehow, we're all going.
Yes. Yes.
So it's, how do you want to go? And it's back to what you said. It's legacy. When I was preparing, for a funeral and obituary and all of that, I never thought about him from the terms of, what did he do in terms of his job? It was all father, husband, community worker, volunteer at our daughter's school, all of those kinds of things. That's legacy.
Yes.
And that's what that's what you want to leave behind.
Exactly, yes. And I've had people say to me, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to think about it. They can clean up the mess when I'm not here. Ooh. And, that's a hard pill to swallow, but I think a lot of that's denial, and people don't want to deal with that, and I do understand it. But Getting back to something you said earlier about, you know, how people will bring their team together, have you come and talk about this. So it's a gift to a team to say, you know, we care about you now. We want you to be well, and we want you to be mind on the job. And so here's a little gift of information so you can start working and so you can be living in the moment, creating your living legacy. And I think that's a very thoughtful gift to give employees.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because I had a company buy 850 of my books, and they gave a copy to every one of their employees because they felt it was important that they took care of their employees before they took care of anybody else. Wow. And they brought me in to speak.
Well, that is a wonderful gift. Well, Jane, we have taken all the full time. It's been a wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. And thank you for joining us on Business Wellness. I'd like to give a special thank you to Park Avenue Hair Design for doing my hair today. And thank you all for joining us. Look forward to seeing you on the next segment. Thank you.